You heard the sound, Mr.
What's up?
Can you mix me a candy cane?
Come on. I looked up at the wrong time.
We're ready to go.
I think we're ready now.
Okay. Alright, so welcome to my exhibition graph. You all know what an exhibition is, so obviously. Alright, so acknowledging race. Copyright disclaimer. The materials included in this presentation are included under the fair use exemptions of the U.S. copyright law, are prepared according to educational, multimedia fair use guidelines, and are restricted to further use. So, race has always been something, obviously, that's intrigued me. I talk about it a lot, if you guys didn't know. But basically, I grew up in a really weird area as far as race goes. When I was growing up, it wasn't very diverse. It's a little bit more diverse now. But, I was literally the only African-American student on my bus and stuff. And it was really weird because I would get all these jokes and everything, and that was really confusing to me as a little kid. So, ever since then, race has always been something, like I said, that's kind of hit home for me. So, and it's a very prevalent part of American society. This is a quote by Barack Obama. He was talking about how issues and race are embedded deeply in American society. This is one of his speeches. Actually, it's an interview. But it just shows that even he feels that in this day and age, race is still a driving factor. And I'm not talking about racism or anything. I'm literally talking about the fact that I'm black and you're white and stuff. That's what I'm talking about. These are just these are just examples of some of the ways that race impacts us as far as students. Admissions, obviously, if anybody's applying for scholarships and stuff, you always see race or culture-based scholarships. You see that a lot. I mean, I've gotten scholarship stuff because I'm black or whatever. So that's kind of how it's relevant to us. All right. So there's a lot of problems that come with race. So I always wondered, to what extent should race be acknowledged in America? I couldn't really figure out, to be honest, how to make my roadmap visually appealing. So if you guys have any suggestions later on, let me know, because I got really, really frustrated. I just said, okay, I'm just going to write text. So anyway, there's really two main perspectives. There's actually three, but I'm going to be focusing on the psychological perspective and the biological perspective, because there's been a lot of research done in those two fields, and really the third one is kind of a sociological perspective, but that really was going to be way too much for our presentation. So in each subpoint, I will be going into basically the theories about why we acknowledge race and the impacts of it. So psychological theories surrounding race, there's obviously a ton of them. I'm just going to hit on a few of them for today. But there's what I call Randall's theory. This is because there's really no theory name for this. It was kind of spearheaded by Randall, and people kind of all share the same common viewpoint as far as scholars go, but there's not, like I said, a specific theory name. So basically, he says that race is simply a social construct, and that people in society always have to basically target someone. That's just how humans are. So essentially what a social construct is something that only has meaning because society gives it meaning. So basically he's saying that a long time ago, society gave race meaning as a way to assess power and assess order, and because of that, it's continued to have meaning. There's a lot of theories of development too. Basically what that is the theory that you develop an identity and race is a part of that identity because it's who you fit in with as a child. This is just explaining what ethnicity is versus, sorry about that, I just noticed Coach's throwing snowballs at each other. Anyway, ethnicity is the idea that one is a member of a particular cultural group, basically, versus race, which is just features, basically. So, I have brown skin, so I'm considered African, but I am part of America, and I live here, so I'm American, African-American. So, Walker he's a psychologist, and he did a big study on how multiracial children develop their identities, and he established that basically the more cultural experiences you have, the more you associate yourself with a specific culture. And he also said that it's really important to psychological well-being. So basically, part of developing a self-esteem is, according to this theory, is identifying yourself with the race and with the culture. these are the stages of ethnic development. They go through the same for racial development. Unexamined, which is when you're like really young, for example, like 2 years old, and you don't even really think about race. That's a really short period of time because from the moment you go outside, you notice that people look different. Moratorium is when you're searching for where you fit in and what to call yourself, basically. And achieved, obviously, is when you've achieved a sense of who you are. All right, so now I've covered a few psychological theories. Like I said, there's a lot more, and I couldn't really decide which ones to include, but I'll probably include more in my actual presentation. There's a lot of psychological impacts of race. I talked about the one drop rule in my proposal, if anyone remembers. Basically, it's that if you have 1 drop of African American blood, you're considered African American. Now, that sounds really harsh until you really think about the fact that, for example, Barack Obama, oftentimes everyone says, oh, we have a black president. Well, in reality, he's mixed. I mean, like just like everybody else, actually, because we're all really mixed. But anyway, he's not even. Both of his parents aren't African American, but just because one of them is, we consider him African American and nothing else. And that happens a lot, actually. It's been happening since slavery, almost with like. It happens more with people who are higher up in society, according to researchers. But it's an example of how there's an impact of acknowledging race because you essentially get mislabeled sometimes as far as who you actually associate yourself with, based on appearance. Oftentimes, adolescents can transition into adulthood without developing their identity, and that has an impact on you because, like I said earlier, according to ACT Youth and other researchers, it's important for you to find somewhere where you fit in, and psychological well-being is really built upon that. So when you don't, which a lot of adults really don't, because, for example, I was watching a little documentary yesterday about a American who lived in a primarily Hispanic culture, and he was Hispanic and white, but all the Hispanics called him white, and all the white people called him Mexican, and so he was like in his 20s, and he still really didn't know what he wanted to call himself, because he was like, I mean, he didn't know, so. Obviously, with race comes stereotypes. According to IB Guides, which makes a ton of different psychology references for IB students, stereotypes are mental representation of basically things that we see every day. There's a lot to take in our world, and we have to generalize things to really comprehend them. So stereotypes let us do that. But when it really becomes impactful is when they're about race. You get things like the stereotype threat effect, and the stereotype threat effect is essentially when one hears a lot of stereotypes about their specific group, and then that results in lower performance. An example of this is, I guess if I was to tell you, Savannah, that constantly, because you are a female, you would never make it in art, even though that doesn't make any sense at all. If I constantly told you that and put you up against like males when you were drawing, do you think it would have some kind of psychological impact on you to some extent? Like if I told you that from when you were younger? Maybe? Normal people, right? Yeah. Well, that's essentially what stereotype is. There's been tons of studies on that, but honestly, I wrote a whole entire paper on that, so it's kind of really hard to go into it without going over time. But that's one of the many impacts that stereotypes have. This is basically exactly what I just said. Okay, so this video kind of represents both the theories and the impacts. It kind of sums it up.
I feel in the U.S. we are obsessed with race and putting you in a specific category. As an albino, you break whatever standards there are. Like, yes, you are, born of a specific race, but the color is gone. How do you define yourself when you have a trait that separates you in so many ways?
When it comes to that, it's more just about my individuality and my personality. I'm always different. Let's knock out the fact that I have albinism. If I did, I'm still a whole different type of breed of a person anyway. I could be like some others who are just, try not to be seen or who try to fit into the crowd. No, I'm going to take this and I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to stick out. I'm going to dye my hair pink because I can. I'm going to get tatted with colors because I can. it's self-expression. I do what I want.
God, you are so beautiful, man. Like, you're literally glowing, and it's not just because you're so white. Now, you mentioned that you are Native American and black. Do you ever find that there is a lot of flack for identifying as anything other than black? Like, have you run into that?
Most certainly, especially a lot of times by my mom as well. Like upon growing up, because my mom's very fair skinned. So I remember one time growing up, I asked her if she was white, and she was like, "No, you're black." And then so when I was going to school, and I tried to tell these kids what I am. If I didn't say that I was just black, I got kicked out of that group. And certainly I'm not white, so I'm not like in that group. It's really divided, and it doesn't really touch on all spectrums. We're very intermingled now. Like there's no just one race.
What are you racially?
My mother is Armenian, and my father is from Helsinki, Finland. So I'm like Eastern and Nordic,
So you're a gypsy.
pretty much. Yeah.
You like to swindle people?
Sure do.
I thought you were Hispanic at first. Like, do you get that a lot?
I get mixed black and white, some kind of Hispanic.
Amber Rose with the natural hair color?
I was actually bald before Amber Rose. And
Oh,
newsflash, no,
Here first.
hello, I wasn't the first bald woman, and there's been a lot of them. But I think, yeah, if you're like an ambiguously yellow woman with a bald head, you are Amber Rose.
Are you white?
I guess. I mean,
What is
I
that?
guess so.
What is white? I mean, what is American? We came here when we conquered Indians. Like, any American is a mixed race. You know, you
So
can't.
you're a barbarian.
Actually, my last name does say barbarian.
That's
So.
what I can tell.
Mhm.
I personally think anybody born after a certain time in this country anyway is mixed. So, we all got a little somebody else floating around in our blood veins. You know what I'm saying? DNA is just,
Nobody's from Africa anymore, yeah.
nobody. Well, not even just from that. It's just everybody. The world now, everybody's got some type of relative that's a different nationality or somewhere down the line. I mean, whether you got to look it up or not, it's there. Nobody's 100% of anything anymore.
Alright, so that video kind of showed how people develop their racial identities. As you heard, almost everybody mentioned how they struggled growing up, not knowing which side to go with or what race they were. Because that area happens to be really diverse, but that kind of demonstrates the theory of development and the impact it has. Because as you see, it impacted everybody in a different way. All right, so I've covered the psychological perspective, and I'll dive into the biological perspective. Now, there isn't really much I have on the biological perspective because a lot of it gets really, really, really sciencey, and as much as I would like to do that, it's not really effective just because I'm not presenting to a science community. I mean, it wouldn't really register as much. But anyway, there's several biological theories about race. The common biological theory, which is kind of what society's general take towards biology and race, is that it has some biological foundation. But APA, which is an American association that focuses on science, they say that basically most of what America thinks about science and race is not very true, and it's mostly, like I said earlier, social construct. They said that's basically based off of old 20th century scientific study that is not valid anymore. So that shows kind of some of the I guess contradictions, because some people believe that I have different genes than a white person because I'm black, but in reality it's not really that way, but a lot of people don't really know. So there's also the unity theory, which says that all humans living today belong to a single species, and that means that we all basically are the same inside genetically. This is something from the Human Genome Project. It also says that basically we all are one. However, there is clearly a biological basis to race, and this is basically a consensus of scientists today. There's a biological basis, but it's not something that makes us different species. For example, basically, most of the people who consider that there's a basis to race link it to evolution and division. So basically, if I live in Africa and you live in the United States, over time you're bound to develop different characteristics than I am. So that's the biological part of it, basically. All right. Basically, there's a lot as far as biological impact goes. Really, it limits the amount of expression that scientists have. I say this because a couple years ago, it was back in 2008, I think, there was a study done by a man really commonly known as Richards Only. No one actually, very few people know his first name for some reason. I don't even know why. But he published this massive study, like years and years of work, and he concluded in one of his experiments that black people have lower IQ than, I think it was Native American people. Now, that wasn't very, acceptable to anyone. Obviously, you hear that, and you're just like, what? But in reality, he wasn't racist or anything. He just did studies, and that's what came out. But because of that, because of the actual conclusion, that's really what everyone heard, and ever since there's been a huge controversy about, how that's wrong to explore that kind of stuff and everything. And in reality, it kind of, it's kind of weird because it makes it so that we can't actually see what's going on as far as that kind of research. And there's a lot that is going on, but not much of it is published, I feel like, because of fear of losing credibility, because he is no one takes his work anymore, even though he's really credible because of that. That's basically what I was just saying. We have, I feel like it impacts the society because we have a restraining order, or we are restrained from knowing the actual truth because scientists can't feel relaxed enough to actually relay that information. Yeah. So essentially, genetic division is, by the laws of evolution, we are going to be different because if we live on different continents and everything, but at the same time, features don't make us different species. It's basically what I found as far as biology goes. Alright, so I've covered a psychological perspective and a biological perspective. This video basically kind of leads into my conclusion and sums up what I feel the two perspectives kind of say about acknowledging race.
My money right. I had a dream I could buy my way to heaven. When I wrote, I slipped that on the necklace. I told God I'll be back in a second. Damn, it's so hard not to act reckless. There we go. The human panda's in the building. What's up, Long Beach? What's really good? So, I never had a home. When I would visit Taiwan, they'd consider me Chinese. When I visit China, they'd consider me American. And when I visited America and I lived in America, they thought I was Korean. And from an early age, the thing that made me realize I was other, that I was different, that I was weird, was food. It was always food, because my mom was the ill cook, and she would always lace me with the best Chinese, Taiwanese home-cooked meals to bring to school. I'd have cha shao bao, I'd have, tofu and cabbage, I'd have tomato and eggs, I'd have red cooked pork spare ribs, and I'd bring all these things to school, and I'd have a thermos of oxtail soup or chicken soup. She always gave me a soup in my Ninja Turtles lunchbox. And I'd look like all the other kids, but when I opened it up, this smells just of sesame oil and pork fat would inundate the room, and everyone thought I was the smelly kid, and everyone picked on me and made fun of me. So I told my mom one day in 3rd grade, I said, Mom, I gotta start eating white people food. You gotta pack me some white people food. And she was like, well, what do white people eat? And I was like, I don't know, sandwiches, mayonnaise, I don't know. So we went to the grocery store, and I found this thing kid cuisine, and I had penguins on, and I love penguins just like penguins love robots. And I went to school, was super excited. I had my kid cuisine, and I was the second to last in line, and I went to go put my food in the microwave when this kid named Edgar changed my life. He grabbed me by the shirt, he threw me to the ground and said, Chinks, get to the back. It's the first time I ever heard that word chink, but I knew what that shit meant. My father told me what it meant, and he said, don't ever let nobody tell you that. And I had a choice to make. I could lay on the ground and I could take it, or I could stand and I could fight. So I threw Edgar's arm in the microwave. And it changed my life because it actually, you know, it gave me the confidence because I started to fight back, but I became a reaction. I didn't realize that by fighting, I still wasn't out from under dominant culture. I was still a slave to it because I was just a reaction. And it was so ill that, you know, there was things I wouldn't even eat mayonnaise anymore, you know, because I was like, white people like mayonnaise, I'm not eating mayonnaise, you know, like white people skateboard, I'm not skateboarding. Like I closed off so much of the world to myself, and I was just a fool. I was ignorant until one day I visited Taiwan again when I was an adolescent, about 19 years old, and I went into the airport and I saw thousands of Taiwanese people. They all looked like me, and there was cab drivers, there's engineers, there's lawyers, there's punk rockers, there's skaters. Man, there's Taiwanese people in mountains. There's Taiwanese people with helmets. There's Taiwanese people sleeping in libraries. There's Taiwanese people in Uggs. I decided what I did was I stripped my life of everything that dominant culture put in my way. And I realized that the world really is everything that I want it to be. And that I can be anyone I want. I could blast hip-hop as loud as I want. I could dress like this and go to work. I don't gotta wear a uniform. I don't gotta wear a name tag. I don't have to be Taiwanese. I don't have to be Chinese. I don't have to be American. I am what I am. And you can like it or love it. You know?
All right. And by the way, after he decided that, he ended up owning his own business, and now he's really successful. His name's Eddie Hank. But anyway, that kind of demonstrates that. I mean, you saw the psychological aspect of that. Like he grew up kind of being confused as far as what he was, and when he knew what he was, it was still impacting him for a very long time because he was almost fighting the other race. You know what I mean? So I feel like this video demonstrates that although like race should be acknowledged, like we're not colorblind or anything, but at the same time, culture is what really matters. It matters who you are, not who you have to align yourself with, kind of, if you know what I mean. Now we're excited. Yeah. Thank you. That's all. Anyone?
The biology aspect, and you know how you talked about restraining war of knowledge?
Yeah.
There's actually a theory called truth of knowledge, and then knowledge